Alrighty guys, welcome back. So we're on to part 2. So we're looking at coring trees and observing tree ring patterns. And there's only one more part, so we're almost kind of right in the middle there, almost halfway done. Now that you have considered the nature of your research site and how environmental conditions affect tree ring growth, it's time to roll up your sleeves and get to work. Trees typically grow one ring per year. They start growing in the spring. The cells are light tan in color, known as early wood. And as growing season ends in the fall, the cell walls thicken, the dark band or the late wood, and eventually stop growing in the winter, causing a very distinct ring. The ring pattern that forms over the entire life of the tree reveals the climatic conditions in which the tree grew. At sites like Humpty Dumpty Talus Slope, enough moisture and long growing season would result in a wide ring. A dry year might result in a very narrow ring. At sites where trees are more sensitive to temperature, like the tree line on a mountaintop or in a boreal forest of northern Alaska and Canada, wide and narrow rings represent warmer and colder years, respectively. Because scientists study climate-sensitive sites where climate is the main driver of the tree growth, trees from the same site will tend to grow in the same pattern of rings and reflect the conditions of the climate. So this is what it would look like if you're actually taking, like if you cut a tree straight down and you looked at it, you would see these rings on it. Tree ring scientists take core samples from trees to learn about climate change of the past. Watch dendrochronologist Nicole Davy describe how to core a tree. So we watched this video already. I'm not going to have us rewatch it. We saw how she cored that tulip tree. We know that when you take a core, it's smaller than the size of a pencil, diameter-wise. It might be longer than a pencil, depending on how long that tree has been around. People often ask if coring a tree hurts the tree. The core samples that scientists take from trees are quite small, less than a diameter of a pencil, and non-destructive to the tree. The tree will heal itself fairly quickly, similar to when a spout is removed after taping a tree for maple syrup. If there is concern after tapping a tree for maple syrup, if there is concern for a particular group of trees, scientists can dip their tree borers into alcohol to be sure they're not spreading any disease from tree to tree. If forest managers are concerned for that tree, they can then deny the permission to core those trees. So in this activity, we're going to be analyzing a series of 5 cores from Humpty Dumpty Talus Slope. What clues can you uncover about the climate of this region over the past 100 years? Below are images of 5 core samples taken from trees on the Talus Slope. The cores were collected in 2002, so that the last complete ring is 2001. And 2002 is incomplete. Notice the bark of the tree on the right side of the image. Since each ring represents 1 year of growth, you could count backwards 1 ring at a time to find the age of the tree when it was cut down. But to make this process simpler, scientists place 1 marker per decade, so 1990, 1980, 1970, 2 marks per 50 years, and 3 marks at the century mark. The marks are going to be dark pencil dots shown on the images below. So this is what the rings look like. You can see here would be the 2002 ring all the way up to the side. This is the 2001, and we know that this is the last full ring because you can see the dark cells, which would have indicated that fall and winter was coming. So you're going to download the Excel spreadsheet, and we're going to do a data analysis example. So look at the first column of the spreadsheet. So let me minimize this a little bit, and I'll shoot this over here, and here is our spreadsheet. Look at the first column. For the first core sample, HD, and this just stands for Humpty Dumpty, and then there's the tree number, U01A. N have been marked for rings that are narrow, and W has been marked for rings that are wide. These data are determined by comparing each ring to each of the nearest neighbors. Your goal in this exercise is to figure out what the most consistently narrow or consistently wide rings are in the remaining 4 cores. So as we're going through, we're going to be looking at the pencil marked rings, and you can see that they've already done the first one for us. So you can see N stand for narrow, which means that there would not have been a lot of rainfall. And I believe that you guys will want to be using a Google Sheets document for this, and I will have this attached. I'll turn it into a Google Sheets document for you. And this will be under let's see, probably the next day's assignment, since I can't attach more than one piece per assignment right now. Okay. So we're going to zoom in on the most recent 20 years of the second core sample. This means you'll need to scroll all the way to the right. You'll be looking for the narrowest and widest rings from this time period. To assist you in data ring gathering, look at the example image above. In this sequence, the 1980s ring is a dot in the right. 1970 is marked with a dot in the center, and the dot on the left is 1960. Okay, so this is the sample that they did for us, and I'm going to zoom in on this so that you can see exactly what we have going on here. So remember, a single pencil dot is going to show you every 10 years. So it's kind of nice, you don't have to worry about doing that. If there are two dots, like right here, you see there's two dots, that represents that this was a 50-year mark. And if there's three, that is a century, that is a 100-year mark, okay? So we don't have to do that one since it was already done for us. All right. So let's start with this one right here then. Oops. Make sure that you do zoom in because this is not a dot. This is just part of the tree. And you'll be attaching this spreadsheet. You'll be sending it back to me as your part of your grade. So for our first one here, we're in 2001. That is a narrow ring. I'm going to go with caps lock. I'll type an N in there. And then my next dot here is going to be roughly 10 years later. It's around 1990. So this ring here, it's stuck right in the middle of a bunch of wide rings. So we're going to go with wide for that one. So there's every 10-year mark. So here's a 50-year mark. Actually, we want to start on this end here. So here's our narrow ring. We want to start on the right. I always want to start from the left. I always forget. So the farther out the ring is, the older it is. So this is a wide ring. Here's our next one. So let's see, 90, 89, 87, 89, 88, 87, 86, 85, 84, 83, 82, 81, 80. That looks kind of like a wide ring. It's similar to that one, so we'll come down here and go with wide. So did you see how I counted that back? Each ring is just 1 year. And this is going to be somewhere in the next 10-year period. That's also going to be a wide ring. So I'm just going to come down here and go with wide. Moving on up. So this is going to be the next 10-year mark. So down in the 60s. That also looks to be wide. Now there are some narrow rings in here, but if it's surrounded by the majority of them as wide, then we're going to go with it's a wide ring. So this is going to be roughly 50 years later in the next 10-year mark. And if you want to mark other rings, you definitely can do that. You don't just have to do the ones that they marked for us. This one looks like a wide ring to me. 10 years later, and go with another wide ring. Oh boy. So it's in the 40s, somewhere in the 30s, we have a wide ring. We need to go to the 20s. That's definitely wide. And down here is roughly wide as well. Then I'll scroll back up here. And here's my next one. So let's start right here. Okay, so these ones look a little bit more narrow than what we had before. All right, so if this is where we're starting off, sort of the 2000 mark, and we'll go with this is kind of a narrow mark. Ten years later, we get wide. 10 years later, we got a wide ring. Ten years later, we got a wide ring. Oh, we're finally going to have a narrow ring down here. At the end. The ones around that one are narrow too, so I'll throw in another one there. We're going to have wide here. Scroll back to the top. 1B. Okay, so that ring looks pretty narrow to me. The next 10-year mark one looks wide, and that one looks wide after that. I'm going to throw in another narrow one because it was narrow right around that time frame too. Scroll on down some. Oh my goodness, that's definitely wide. Moving on down, that one is definitely wide. In comparison, this next one here is going to be more narrow. And then we have a wide one. Another wide one. Oh my gosh. And then that one was also wide. So this tree was actually cut down a little bit early because our sample size is not as big. Let's go back to the top, and this is our last one to do. Oh, okay, these ones are a lot of little ones. So this one looks like it has a bit of a wider ring. And 10 years later, it has a wider ring too. Then it gets pretty narrow. These are definitely narrow rings. And then there was a crack in the tree. So if you see a crack in the tree, you would just want to label that as a crack. I'm going to put N crack because we don't know what could have caused the tree to crack, but it may not be the best as far as giving us new information would go. Okay, so after that, you want to look for markers here. So we compare our data. So we can see that, I mean, it's going to be fairly consistent. Granted, these trees are not going to be, neighboring trees, but they are all taken from the same general area. So if one tree has a wide ring, then the other ones should hypothetically also have wide rings. And that does work out in most cases for us. I'm not sure where this last tree was taken from, but obviously it was a little bit drier in that area, especially since there was a crack. Maybe there was some type of a fire that occurred. So you'll attach that spreadsheet to our data or for your assignment. What are the marker years that you have found in the samples? In other words, which years consistently stand out for being very narrow or wide compared to their neighboring years? So some major marker years would happen sometime in the 40s, the early 60s, and 1990 would be my years to look at the coring samples there. And then the last question just says to share your results with other lab groups. I'm not going to worry about sharing them because we're working online and you guys can't get close right now, but I've shared my data with you, so hopefully your data is similar to mine. You might have a few differences here and there. You may have thrown in a couple extra points than I did, and that's all fine. It's all well and good. But that is it for this part here. Alrighty, guys, I'll talk to you later.